Hello and welcome to Fultonland Live. Glad to see you guys here today. We've got a good show planned for you, I think, and I hope that you guys are doing well. So first I want to welcome those who are in the chat. Dojo Kun, looks like he had to run to a meeting, but glad that you are able to make it. Hope you enjoy the replay. Mr. Von Stugel, Past Master Dan, hello. Glad you enjoyed the title of the stream. We'll be getting into that shortly. Statistical Zero, good to see you, Stato. The lines aren't too long. You got here at a good time. George Travelos, good to see you, George. Inkfinity Comics, good to see you, Alejandro.
Good day there.
Russ, how you doing today?
Yeah, good. Yeah. It's lovely and sunny. It's lovely and sunny here in the UK.
Oh, it's sunny in the UK.
It's been dry for a few weeks, so I've been able to go out and train in the garden because I still can't get back into a dojo yet. That's going to be next month. But so I've been able to train in the garden, so I'm very happy. Train early today because of Fultonland.
Yeah,
I usually train a little bit later, but yeah. So and lots of art, lots of drawing.
Have you been drawing?
Lots of outlier work, yes.
Oh wow, you don't say.
And putting stuff together for the trade dress on Only Death. So it's everything's coming up.
I'm not sure if you've talked about that on this show, but you've got a new venue for distributing your book. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
That's right. Arrow Comics. Some people may remember them from the 90s. They've been in and out a few times. Randy Zimmerman is now bringing Arrow Comics back, and he's been in the business for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're working with Liberty Distribution. And I'm going to be doing reprints of the books for the direct market.
Nice.
So that still means that those people that back the book will be getting the only version of that book in the way that it is. So, for instance, in this first print run, I only did 400 books. So hopefully there'll be a few for the second campaign for book 2, so people can do a catch up if I can get some new customers or new backers. But that's the only time it will be printed in that format. It has exclusive content in it. Obviously, you get the extras in the perks and that kind of stuff. So that it's the VIP experience of Only Death Can Save Us in those books. But obviously as creators, we want to get our stories out as far and as wide as we possibly can. So for a trade version, so floppy versions of it, Arrow Comics has asked me to come on board, and I'm quite happy to, because Randy's a great guy. He knows a huge amount, incredible experience in the industry, and we'll see how that goes. What I am hoping to be able to do is because obviously I have to produce new covers. Those covers will all be in book 2, so everybody will be able to get their hands on those. And
sorry, just to clarify 1 second. So the covers that are going on the Arrow version of the comics will be included in the crowdfunded version of Only Death Book 2.
That's right. They'll all be included.
So the backers are going to get to see all the art.
The backers get to see everything. The backers,
awesome.
In fact, there is exclusive content in the books that won't be republished, that won't be reprinted.
Nice.
And those. So something I want to do is get hold of copies of those books and sign them, and actually have them as a perk with the cover art. So the actual inked piece, and it comes with the book. So it's a special perk. It's always a balancing act with these things. I mean, something we'll be talking about today. It's always a balancing act because you want your story to get out to as many people as possible. You want a wide audience, but at the same time, you do want to use crowdfunding. You do want to have. I don't know who it was that said it, but it's like you as an artist, you can survive on 1,000 fans, a
Yep.
thousand committed fans, and you want to give those people, so those are effectively the people that have backed my book. Those
Yeah.
people, you want to give them the absolutely best you can give them. You want to give them the VIP version of everything, so that they have something special. So if there are
Hmm.
people out there that buy the floppy version, like this one single book that was in the campaign, that's special. There's something special about that book. And you won't get it again. Basically, it's a one time only thing. So all in all, I've been doing a few bits of that. Most of my work has been around Outliers, though, for the last week since we last spoke.
Hmm.
I think we're going to be showing a little bit of that at the end of the stream. I'm very pleased with what's coming out. Actually, I think it's some of my finest work. So very, very happy.
I happen to agree, although I'm biased.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that you think so as well.
No, yeah. I mean, just I mean, we'll be showing the pages, but page 2 I did yesterday, and I was like,
Hmm.
I kind of walked away from the board and went, "That's not bad." It's not,
Yeah.
it's not often you do that. You don't you kind of go, oh, I'm no good. I'm rubbish. I'm gonna go and
Yeah.
cut my ear off.
Yeah.
Whatever it
As a
is.
writer, there are
Yeah,
those days where, I'm not happy with anything that I write. And then on the days where I come back and I reread it, and I go, oh, yeah, it's not bad.
yeah,
Then I allow myself to enjoy it for a moment, and then I'm on to the next thing.
I did this. I did a book for Unstoppable Comics, Storm Chasers, and I just saw the colours for that today, and I must have drawn that 18 months ago,
Uh-huh.
and I'd just seen the colours for it today because things happen. And I looked at it, and I remember being sort of okay with it, thinking, yeah, it's all right.
Hmm.
And then I looked at it today, and I actually looked at it and went, blimey, that looks really good. Because whenever you see somebody else do something, so the colours. I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Inkspots does with the
Hmm.
colours on our book. But whenever you see that extra layer go on, you kind of go, oh, that's not bad. So
Yeah,
yeah, really, really quite happy.
that's great. Oh, it looks like we've got a Gentleman Scoundrels raid. So the folks that are coming over from the Gentleman Scoundrels show, welcome. Glad to
Welcome.
see you guys here. Um, yeah, so Russ mentioned we're going to show some Outliers artwork towards the end of the show because Russ is penciling interior pages. And last week we sort of explained in the production process of a comic book, you've got the writer who comes up with either an outline or a full script, depending on the method that is being used on that book, and then they hand it off to the illustrator. If it's a separate penciler and inker team, then it's the penciler who does what we call the layouts or the breakdowns or the thumbnails, which are essentially loose sketches to figure out the composition of the panel, the composition of the page, what have you. And when you've got editors involved, then you have the editor review the script, you have the editor review the layouts. Once the layouts are approved, then the penciler goes ahead and finishes off those sketches, turns them into finished drawings. And so today we're going to show you guys the difference in the first couple of pages of the book, what it was like in the layout stage last week, and then now what the finished pencils look like this week. So hope you guys enjoy that.
Uh, those processes vary from book
Mm-hmm.
to book. They also vary from age to age. So back in the Bronze Age, you would have a lot of people who are very experienced at inking,
Yeah.
who would not need finished pencils in the way that you see finished pencils these days.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing my own inks. So it's up to me how far I finish my pencils. If you actually look at some of Kirby's older pencils, wow, they're
Very
beautiful
loose.
some of them were loose and some of them were incredibly detailed. So
Depending on how many
yeah,
books he was working on that
working
month.
on
Yeah.
exactly. It came down to what he was doing. So fortunately, I can focus very much my pencil work and my ink work on Outliers. I'm just on this one project, unlike geniuses like that who had so many things to do. But there was a point where a lot of those artists like John Buscema and Kirby were doing loose layouts and letting quality artists who had decided to be inkers to finish that work off. You look at someone like Joe Sinnott, you can't get any better than that in my view. So,
Yeah.
but there were several of his standard, at that moment in time. So just to let everyone know, there are different ways of doing it, but this is the way we've chosen. I think it's probably the best route. So,
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that we were talking about before the show is that when you've got when people are making comics these days, Russ was just referring to some of the things that were done back in the old days. Well, now we've got different ways that comics can be made. Technology obviously has advanced quite a lot, and there are so many options open to people now. If you're an artist, if you're a writer, if you're a colorist, if you're a letterer, if you're an editor, I mean, no matter what you do within the scheme of things, we've got options. And when it comes to the production process overall, obviously we're all familiar with crowdfunding, and most, if not all of us, are familiar with, or at least have a passing knowledge of, how comics are made in the mainstream, or how the larger independent publishers, because they basically follow the same process as the big mainstream publishers. But with the invention of crowdfunding, and then the kind of refinement of crowdfunding, I would say that we've got, not only do we have more options available to us now than at any other time in the history of comic book production, but we also have more flexibility. And with that comes both punishment and rewards, really. And if we decide to go the crowdfunding route, there are pros and cons. If we decide to go the traditional route, there are pros and cons. But today I wanted to talk specifically about crowdfunding, and how those kind of punishments and rewards that are part of it show up in the process, and how we deal with those things really has a major impact on how successful we are with crowdfunding when it comes to the production of comics themselves. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this on this show, where there's heavy interaction with viewers, is because with crowdfunding, similar to the traditional mainstream model, without customers buying books, there's no point in producing the comics. I mean, I know that that's an obvious point, and everybody who's watching this right now understands that. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people in mainstream comic book production who don't seem to understand that. And they seem to think, whoa, we have stores buying our comics, and that's our customer. Okay, well, why do they buy comics from the distributor who buys them from the publisher? Well, it's because there are people coming into their stores wanting to buy those books. So obviously, if those readers are not coming in to buy the books, then those stores are not going to order from the distributor. The distributor is not going to order from the publisher. And you, my mainstream comic book creator friend, do not have a job. So it's one of those situations where, whether you're in crowdfunding and you're interacting with customers daily or weekly or whatever it is, sometimes multiple times per day. In crowdfunding, that's very common. At least my experience has been that way. I've worked on several books at this point, and I love customer interaction. I'm interacting with customers on a daily basis, whether it's because I'm part of a live show on YouTube, or because I'm chatting with them on Twitter, or whatever it is. I love the constant interaction, and I really, quite frankly, now that I've been in it for a couple of years and making comics this way, because I started in 2019 working on independent books that were produced through crowdfunding. And Russ, I don't know how it's been for you. I'm going to ask you to give me your take on this in just a second. But for me, I wouldn't want at this point. I would not want to make comics any other way. This is my preferred method. Now, on one hand, I would love to be able to just sit and in my office or my backyard and just write and not have to do anything else or just edit. I just write or I just edit and I don't have to do anything else, and a check just magically appears and goes into my bank account.
Love those magic checks.
Yeah, I mean, in a quote unquote ideal world, yeah, that'd be great. I wouldn't have to do any of the other stuff. I could simply be creative. But that's not reality, and we all know that. So, Russ, my question to you is: you have worked, you've been drawing books for what, 11 years, 12 years, something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, and so you've worked for publishers, and now you've worked for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen that there are pros and cons to working with publishers, and you've seen there are pros and cons to crowdfunding.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I have titled this stream "Crowdfunding is like hugging a magical cactus" is because I see crowdfunding as, if you do your homework, if you get the lay of the land first, you understand that if you do crowdfunding, there's going to be some pain involved just by virtue of getting the work done. Yep. And all the things that are involved with building up an audience and marketing your product to the audience so that they have awareness, first of all, of your product. Mm-hmm. And then they have, after awareness, they have the information they need to make a buying decision. Do I want to buy this or do I not want to buy this? Mm-hmm. And then after they have the buying decision, you need to give them the ability to actually buy the thing if they want to buy it. And then after they've bought it and you've made it, then you have to get it to them, right? Mm-hmm. So that's not all fun and games. There's a lot of pain and heartache that goes into that. But like the magical cactus, if you can push through the pain of those spines digging into your flesh and you get to the green part and you hug that cactus and it grants your wish, and my wish as a comic creator is to be paid money for producing this stuff and for people to enjoy what they read. And if I make enough of these people happy, then they will pay me enough that it all is worth it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to reach out. I'm going to hug that cactus, knowing that it's going to hurt. I'm going to push through the pain, get to that soft green center. I'm going to hug that thing. I'm going to wish for enough money that it'll pay for my campaign. It doesn't mean it'll make me rich, but it will fund the production of the book.
Yeah.
Which will get me the chance to reward the trust of my backers with a story that hopefully they enjoy, which they then might back me at the same tier or a higher tier on the next one, or they might tell people about it and get them to back and all of that. So now that I've kind of set the table for you, what has your experience been working for publishers and working for yourself through crowdfunding, in essence, working directly for your readers?
Yeah.
What have those experiences been like? And then am I sort of on point with the magical cactus metaphor, or am I just way off base?
Yeah, no. First thing the first thing I will underpin everything with is nothing is worth having unless there's at least a little discomfort getting it. That's just a life lesson. Second life lesson is, I suppose, clean your room, young man. These things are important. Self-drive, pushing yourself. I think if I stick to just that question, because I'm sure we'll come back to all the other things we're going to talk about. The difference between the two. I've been fortunate enough to be working for myself since 2000. Okay. I started my own business, and that was in software and retail and the holiday sector. So I've been out of working for directly as an employee of another company since 2000. So that's 21 years. So that's the vast majority of my career, as it happens.
Mm-hmm.
I worked out then very quickly that the masquerade that you are safe and secure when you're employed by a large company is complete rubbish, because they can have you gone like that. They can fold like that. In fact, I found out
Mm-hmm.
after I'd left the agency I was with that they nearly folded on several occasions, and I would have been dropped in it. I would have had nothing, because there wouldn't have been any redundancy, because the company would have folded. And I
Yeah.
can guarantee you the scumbags who were running the company, of which there were a couple, not all of them, some of them were decent, but I got a couple of them who ended up ruining the company, and they did go under. They would have taken as much money as they could, and they'd have left me high and dry. That I was offered a directorship on the way out. These guys were just they weren't worth it. Anyway, that's the illusion that you're in some way, and I will. This does mean something. This is all relevant to what we're talking about. That you are in some way more secure working for someone else. And then I started my own business, and I saw what was coming. So I could see when the lean time was. If there was a lean time, I had a way of working around it.
Yeah.
And this ended up with me working for myself when I ended up being an illustrator. When I say working for myself, there's a difference between only being a company director
Mm-hmm.
and being self-employed. They're two different things. And they have different responsibilities and different requirements. But something that I could see all the time was what was going on, and it's that came round again when I worked for publishers. So, as a dream, as a kid, and this is something I mention quite a lot, is it's not just the dream to draw comics. The
Mm-hmm.
dream is to be in the bullpen. The dream is to be paid for drawing comics.
Yep.
It's not about the money. It's about the fact that someone thinks enough of your work that they will pay you, and that people think enough of your work that they will read it or enjoy it in a comic book. It's about
Mm-hmm.
representation of your talents, of your abilities, and that it means something, and you're giving something back, albeit people are paying for it. But it's an interaction between you and the reader, the end user. So that was very important to me. So I got the job, and this is something else we've been talking about gaining contacts, similar to what you were saying about people giving you, owing you favors because you've done something for them. We had that conversation before, and I worked with someone on a gig where I came to comics in 2010 thinking, I've had a career. I should be able to get myself a job. This is not the way it works. So I ended up because I got rid of my business, and there was some buffer for me. I took very, very low paid work, and I ended up doing a graphic novel that didn't end up getting published. But I worked with someone called Jason Quinn, and he ended up being the head of content for Campfire graphic novels. He came back and then was in charge of. He was the editor for Doctor Who Adventures, and because I'd worked with him on that really low-paying gig back in the day, he came and found me. I'd also been working with his brother Tim Quinn, who used to work for Marvel, and because I'd made these connections and I'd worked the way I had, I got the benefit of making that network, and I got the gig on Doctor Who. But very soon after getting the gig on Doctor Who, I realised that, where was the next gig going to come from? So much like being employed by a company was not the safe harbor that it looks like.
Yeah.
When you think about people who are self-employed and don't know where their next job is coming from, well, they can plan. When you're doing pages for a publisher, and that's all the time you've got, you're just doing pages, you're pumping them out, and you're happy, you're in your dungeon, you're drawing away, and you're thinking, yeah, I'm a comic book artist, it's great. And then they cancel the comic. What do you do now?
Yeah.
Where's next? you've got no plans. You've not even the plans that you had, you couldn't put into action because you were working so hard on those pages.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when I consider the money I was getting for those pages, it wasn't top dollar. They paid me okay. And
Yeah.
it was good enough. It was a good wage, but there was nothing after it. There was no
Mm-hmm.
buffer. There is nothing. Because obviously you're doing comics, you're doing magazines that are several months ahead of the publish date.
Right.
So if they see it stopping, they might continue being published and you're out of work.
Right.
Fortunately, I got more work from Panini. I did, and I ended up doing the Draw the Marvel Way stuff. I did the Ben 10 stuff and other bits and pieces and more Doctor Who stuff. But I soon realized, after the experience of being employed and then having my own company and seeing the pitfalls and seeing how you could foresee and plan your way out of trouble, whereas if you're depending on someone else, you cannot. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It was exactly the same scenario. And it was this scenario of, well, the big publishing companies for comics were not going to come and rescue me. Okay. And to be perfectly honest, I could see, we all know how the industry has changed over the last 10 years. I mean, it was a niche industry anyway, and it had cliques and there was always nepotism, but it's gone way beyond that now. And there's no way that I'm going to get a job at any of the big, if Marvel were to ask me to draw a book, I'm a whore, I'll do it. Okay. Because I love drawing, but even then, saying that's almost like that's a historic idea that I have in my head. I don't know that I would anymore.
Yeah.
Because if I'm too busy doing my own stuff that I love and I own, or working with someone like you on stuff that I'm completely invested in, okay, and it's a growing business. It's a growing business and a growing IP, and a growing project. Then why would I want to go back to the dungeon? Why would I want to go back to drawing somebody else's stuff? Getting Only Death out on the direct market and doing reprints of the books, that's great. That kind of stuff, and everybody gets the opportunity to do that, I think. But yeah, so the difference is I suppose being in charge and not just having some control over what's going on at that moment, but also seeing the pitfalls further down. If you've done your research and if you keep your eyes open, you can see what's coming. You can see the dangers, and so you can move. You're more agile as a smaller group, smaller creators like us, smaller publishing houses, but projects. We're more agile to work our way around those things. And actually, I've found myself in a situation. But part of some of my decision to go and do Only Death Can Save Us, to go out there and just say, sod this, I'm doing it myself. Some of it was accident. Some of it was luck. Some of it was I'd had enough. I wasn't going to be in the dungeon anymore. If I was, it was going to be my dungeon.
Yeah.
And so that's the difference, I suppose. From a money perspective, obviously, if you just look at it from a perspective of how much am I getting for the page, then working for a publisher currently is better. But you got to get that work, and there's no guarantee that they're going to treat you well. And the thing is by, like, so for instance, I didn't make profits. There are no things such as profits per se in normal crowdfunding.
Right.
All you can hope to do is get yourself a page rate. So my page rate was very low for Only Death Can Save Us, but it was still a page rate. It was I still got a percentage of that money per page. It wasn't all lost on printing and everything. I got a percentage of the money that went towards my production of it, and I even paid some. I even managed to pay my writer as well. Because he'd done some plot and what have you, and he's now on a bigger percentage because we've had. Because we've had success there and we're moving on. So I'm hoping, touch wood, that I can encourage more people, that I can do more marketing, that I can get out to a bigger audience and make my second campaign that much larger. And like we were saying earlier, the focus is to get yourself to that 1,000 backers, or even 500. Actually, 500 is enough for me. But but of 500 or 1,000 backers, and you're keeping those people happy. You're providing them with the VIP treatment, the quality product. This is the toppermost thing that you can get. That is only death can save us. There are derivatives out there. There are other. There's direct market stuff, but this is the best you can get. And as a backer, as someone who's invested their time and money in you, you're going to give them the best that you can. And there's something special about crowdfunding from that perspective that you don't get from working for a publisher.
And so for you as a crowdfunding creator and also a customer and reader of crowdfunded books, would you say that you've had a number of years drawing, being employed by a publishing company, and you work for a page rate, and you don't know how long you'll have the job because they could effectively cancel the book, and then you're out of work, and you don't know, they don't guarantee you that if they cancel the book they'll give you another one. So you've been on that side of it, and now you've gone through crowdfunding, both as a customer where you know what it's like for them to go through the buying experience, and then you have gone through this as a creator as well, and there's a certain amount of pain that comes from doing it the crowdfunded way. But from what I've heard you say, there's also a significant amount of pain that comes from working in a traditional publishing environment, right? For a page rate that a publisher you hope is going to continue keeping you employed, but you never know if they will or not. Whereas with crowdfunding, your pay is not guaranteed, but it sounds to me, and correct me if I got any of this wrong, sounds to me like because you're so closely connected with your readers, you have a much better feel for whether that quote unquote next work is going to be available, because in effect, it's if the readers like your book, are they going to come back for the next one? And are you getting a sense from them like they're telling other people about it, and you may even get higher sales the next time around. So in that sense, there's a little more, and again, correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, but it seems to me like with your experience, there's a little more security in that, just because you're working or you're interacting directly with your customers who are buying your books.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's easier to get. So if you're working for a publisher and they sell 10,000 books and they go, it's not enough. That's because they're a publishing company. They've got all these bills they've got to pay. They're paying you a high page rate. As an independent creator, you're taking a chance, which is part of the sweat equity that you should be showing your potential backers. You're taking the chance, you're taking the risk, but the rewards are there if you work hard, and you can't expect to get them all back on book one.
Yeah.
You have to think of it as a long-term thing. You have to think of it as like, well, maybe I'll get that 500 by book 3 or 4. And then it becomes that, and in the process of doing that, you might have to take other work. You definitely will have to take other work. You'll have to do all other kinds of things. And then once you get to that point, you can say, okay, well, if I'm keeping these 500 to 1,000 people happy, okay, I can bring down my production time. I can do more books, and I can do what my fans, really like. Okay. Yeah. It doesn't mean that they get control of the work. Doesn't mean they get to tell you what to do. Right. You're just there to make sure that you're entertaining them. And the publisher can't be as agile as that.
Yeah.
But the pain is still there if you're working for the publisher, because you never know. But first off, you never know when you could be dropped. So it leaves you in. You're never completely safe. I mean, you're never completely safe anyway, but at least if you're an independent, you're in control of your own environment.
And they also have a huge amount of editorial control over your work, whether you're a writer or an artist or a colorist, whatever. If they don't like what you're doing, or even if they like what you're doing, but there's something else going on with the company, they can just tell you, nope, that's not going to fly. You have to do it this way. Yes. And then at that point, how much of a creator are you really?
Exactly. If you're at the behest of somebody else, then all you are is you're just a cog in the machine. Um, you could say that about some of the artists that I adore from the Bronze Age. Well, they were just cogs in the machine. No, they were creating constantly, and a lot of the stuff they did, they really loved doing.
Yeah.
Okay, that it wasn't their IP, but it was a different time. Now everybody's so much more savvy.
Mm-hmm.
We know that we don't want to be screwed out of something that would belong to us by a larger company.
Yeah.
But on top of that, it's like I for Doctor Who, I had a great time. I had very little. The editor would, Jason would be like, "No, that looks great."
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, some of it must have been down to my ability. I must have got it right,
Yep.
but at the same time, Jason was really sort of soft touch. He just wanted it to flow, and it was a great time. Uh, Ben 10 work was much more. The actual editorial wasn't much at all. Again, it was very soft, but I was restricted by design guides, by
Okay.
style guides. The last thing I did for Doctor Who was an absolute nightmare.
Mm.
And that was a special that I did, and that was mostly, that went backwards and forwards through a different part of the BBC than it had done for my previous outing, and that was an absolute mare. It was awful.
Okay.
It was much like you say, that it wasn't just editorial. There was all this backwards and forwards, and I was very big on likenesses, and they were telling me what my likenesses were and weren't, and when I could compare it to some of the other stuff that was being published at the same
Yeah.
time that didn't even look anything like the people they were supposed to look like.
Yep.
I was obviously in a different zone. I was in a different place from those other people who were being edited, because I got a really hard time.
Mm.
Yeah, it's not the easy ride you think it is. There's the I'm going to be fair to a lot of the people. I'm going to try and be as even-handed as I can be to a lot of the creatives that are out there working for the large companies at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and that they do get a hard time over some of their art. And I'm sure a lot of them are just trying to make ends meet. They're just trying to get a job out the door, and sometimes it doesn't really work that well. And
Mm-hmm.
they get a hard time on Twitter, or they get a hard time. I mean, obviously, we're in an environment where this has been set up. And it's not necessarily the artist's fault, or the creator, or the unique creator. It's the environment that the big two have set up for themselves, and their creators and their fans.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is kind of like expected. Like, if you're going to treat people badly, they're going to get treated badly back. But to be fair to a lot of creators and artists out there, a lot of them are just trying to get a job done, and I know what that's like. You are trying to get a job done, and some of it comes down to, because of the history we've had from the Bronze Age,
Mm-hmm.
because of the history that we've had from people being screwed out of IP, people being ignored when it comes to their work on large brands, that some of the artists that work for larger companies now just phone it in,
Yep.
and you can't blame them, because they're probably getting a crappy page rate, and they don't care about the brand. And why should they? Because they know they're going to get screwed over.
Yeah. So you having worked both for mainstream publishing companies and now working for yourself using the crowdfunding model. And a minute ago, Art T. Bear joined us. How's it
Yes.
going, Art? Good to see you. Thanks for joining the show. And he spent
Thank you, Art. Thank you.
several decades in the mainstream, and then he was kind of in and out of the creator-owned scene over the years. He did creator-owned work through Image in the 90s, and the last few years has been doing creator-owned work through crowdfunding. And because I've had conversations with Art about this, and you and I have had conversations about this, Russ, I can safely say that uh, you, me, Art, we all, despite the pain that comes with crowdfunding, because all three of us, none of us are natural extroverts. None
No.
of us would wake up in the morning and think, you know what I'd really like to do is get on camera and try to entertain the world today. none of us none of us are saying what I'd really like to do is go out and promote myself. I'd really like to go out
Yeah.
and try to convince people to buy my stuff. I'd really like to, there's none of that. I mean, if we had our druthers, we would just be, in our office drawing, writing, editing, whatever it is, and that would be that. But we all live in reality, and
Mm.
so we've looked around and we've said, okay, there's the mainstream, the way they're doing things. Then there's the independent side of the industry that's still going through publishers. So in effect, it's going through the same model of working and trying to produce work, but you're doing it on a much smaller scale.
I have a bugbear.
What's that?
The idea that IDW, the Image, the Dark Horse, that Boom are in some way indie.
Oh yeah,
Kind
I'm
of.
with you.
I'm sorry. It's like indie music back in the day. Oh, it's indie. It's like now it's a type. Indie is a type of music, and it's like that
Right.
with comics. Like there are indies. It's a type. So you've got the big two, and then you've got indies, but they're not independents per se. Not in the way that give you that Artie Bear. I'm gonna take a screenshot of that.
There you go.
Um, it isn't indie in the sense of the word, the essence of being independent. They're large companies. They have roots into Hollywood. They probably have back roots into Marvel and DC as well. And
Yeah.
there's a free flow of talent in between. It's still part of the clique. It's still
Right.
part of it. They're not. I don't consider them indies.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they are, but you know
Right.
what I mean.
I often lump them together as either the top 5 or top 10 publishers, depending on what the subject of conversation is. And that's how I don't distinguish between mainstream and indie as far as they go. They're all corporations. They're all publishing through, and they're making corporate comics. So I just think of them as the big 5 or the big 10. And then you got the indies, right? And then more independent than that, you've got the crowdfunded indie comics and crowdfunded indie creators. And that's where we have the most freedom. It's where, as far as I'm concerned, it's where it's the most fun.
Yeah.
And even though it requires us to assume a lot more risk on a day-to-day basis in how we get our work produced, it doesn't guarantee us a steady page rate or paycheck, however you want to look at it. But then again, as you were saying, in corporate comics, you're not guaranteed that either. You sign a contract that says you're going to get X amount of dollars per page. Maybe you are in it long enough and you're skilled enough that you can get a book rate where they pay you X amount of money per book. But still, they can cancel that at any time. They can cancel your income at any time.
You're a freelancer. You can be out the door any moment. Yeah,
you're a freelancer. So I just think that when it comes down to crowdfunding, and we're gonna kind of put a bow on this topic, and then we're gonna show off some Outliers artwork. And I think that when it comes to crowdfunding and the kind of the pain and suffering that creators have to go through to get their books published, and they may or may not see the financial results that they're hoping for. I just want to emphasize that it is a marathon, not a sprint. Yeah. And if somebody doesn't get the sales that they think their book deserves the first time or the second time or the third time, it's within our own power. It's within our own means to change things up the way that we're doing things, so that we can try to increase those sales. It might be um, uh, I don't know if comforting is the right word, but I can't think of a better one at the moment. It may be comforting to think that, well, if I was working for a publisher, they would take care of all of that.
No.
Corporate comics are horrible at marketing
Yeah,
their
no,
books. I can't tell you how many creators from the mainstream have bemoaned that they did great work, they were on a great creative team, they produced a great book, and their publisher didn't do any marketing for it, and
no,
therefore it didn't sell.
no. I've been on. I have had two graphic novels published by an indie that doesn't do any of its own marketing. You have to do it all for yourself, and you've given away 50% of your IP by getting it published with them. So that's the way it works. I would say, listen, you have to see it as a business. There's too many people coming to crowdfunding and seeing somebody making $100,000 and thinking, "Oh, right, I can do that." As
Yeah.
it's like there's a whole bunch of reasons. In the same way, there's only a very small percentage of superstar comic book artists at Marvel and DC.
Mm-hmm.
There's only going to be a small percentage of superstars in anything, let alone in crowdfunding. And you only get, it's all on merit. And it doesn't have to be the best artist or the best writer or even the best marketeer. It's
Mm-hmm.
just how those combinations of things come together
Right.
and some really hard work.
Yeah.
And you must always look at each book you put out on, it's a business, and you're growing that business. So for instance, with me, Only Death Can Save Us. Okay, it's a business. It's an extra business. Yes, it creatively, I love it. It's my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I see a future where I want to make stories from the creative aspect. I want to do the best art that I can from a sales and from a let's call it a connection perspective. I want to sell as many as possible, and I want to connect with as many readers as possible, because that's the point of writing stories.
Yeah.
But you have to temper that with the real world.
Yep.
We all need to make money to survive. We all need to eat. Occasionally I let my kids out. It's you've got to be in the real world, and that means you have to approach it as a business. We were talking earlier about having experiences throughout our lives. Now
Mm-hmm.
I've gone left and I've gone right, and I've jumped this way and that way to make a career. Okay, I've
Yeah.
had a career as a designer, I actually started off in a bank. I was a runner on a dealing floor. Okay, I washed dishes.
Mm-hmm.
I delivered stuff. I ended up being a designer for retail. Then I was an art director. Then I ended up having my own business. I was a coder. I was a UI designer. Okay, I did all these kinds of stuff. I taught art for a while. I taught karate at different venues for money. You do anything you need to do to make your business work. Okay, and you put what you can into it. You put everything into it, because you have to be driven to do comics. It's a creative environment, and it's very much about connecting with people, and the only way to do that is to drive yourself forward. You have to provide that product, you have to provide that story, and convince people to come along with you, and then
Mm-hmm.
entertain them once they're there. And the only way you're going to manage to do it is by pulling your finger out and working hard and looking at other people, looking at the superstars, and
Mm-hmm.
saying, why haven't I got that? Makes you a victim. Don't be a victim.
Yeah.
Do your own thing. Get on with it. Make it happen for you. And it doesn't have to, you shouldn't measure yourself against people that make millions. You measure yourself against what works for you.
Yeah.
I don't need to make millions. Like I say, my target is 500. If I can get 500, if it was just me doing Only Death Can Save Us, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have any outliers to do or any other work, okay, I could get 500 people, I could do 2.5 books a year, and I would make a salary. That's my target.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a target. You have to give yourself a business target. You have to look at your budgets, look at the way the business works,
Yeah.
make it happen. But just sitting there and being a victim and saying, well, why can't I have what that person has? Why can't I be as successful as that? Make it happen for yourself. But it is there. The magic
Mhm.
in the Cactus is definitely there. It is
Yep.
there, but you've got to go through the needles, unfortunately. And there's no shortcut. There is
Mhm.
no shortcut to hard work. And you can always pick out people and say, "Oh, they had a shortcut." Very few and far between. The vast majority of people that make something happen and are successful are because they've pushed and worked really hard.
Yeah. And I want to touch on something that Matt Fowler mentioned in the chat about the stress of funding. And one of the things that I know has been difficult for a lot of crowdfunding creators to learn, but I've seen a lot of them learn it more or less through trial and error. But
Mm.
it's true, I think, with any other professional pursuits. If you're wanting to really achieve something great in a profession, regardless of what profession it is, you are necessarily going to have to go through hardships to get there because
Mm.
there's too much competition in your way. They're not just going to stand aside and let you waltz in and achieve whatever that is that you want, whether it's becoming, a millionaire or becoming a senior manager at a grocery store or whatever it is, doesn't really matter. There's always going to be these obstacles. And so one of the things that I can empathize with Matt on, talking about the stress of funding, I've got some chronic health problems where the symptoms get made worse when my stress level goes up. So one of the things that I have to do is very carefully monitor what things cause me stress, what things relieve stress, and then I go through an hourly juggling act of counterbalancing the stressful stuff with things that relieve stress. And I think it's really important that when people are getting into crowdfunding, they find out real quick that it is very stressful, particularly from all of the people that I've talked to who have gone through it, most of them multiple times now over the last few years, particularly stressful during funding, where you're trying to raise funds for your campaign, and then also particularly stressful during the fulfillment phase, where you're sending those packages out and you're hoping they get there to where they're supposed to go because you're paying the shipping for them to get there, uh, and you're just hoping that they show up, and you've got to just wait until you hear back from people. Did you actually get what we sent out? What you and I both together paid for you to get it? And so I definitely understand the stress, and I empathize personally, with how that can have effect on a person. But I also think that it's our own responsibility to figure out how to manage that stress, because here's the thing: the way I look at it is, if I want success in this crowdfunding environment, if I want it bad enough, I'm going to do whatever is required of me in order to achieve it. Now, if that means that I have to manage my workload and turn down more work than what I take on, then that's what I have to do. And, I don't like turning down work.
Mhm.
On one hand, it's nice to have to turn down work as opposed to wishing you had work and you can't seem to find it.
Mm.
That's so in that sense, it's a nice problem to have, and I'm certainly grateful that I'm in the position that I'm in. In 2018, I was offering to work for free and couldn't get anybody to return a message. Now, a few years later, after putting in a whole lot of time, effort, and hard work, I'm in a position where in the last 6-7 months, I've had to turn down a lot more jobs than I've agreed to take on.
Mm.
Um, but a lot of that has to do with managing that stress level. So I'm turning down financial reward that would be in exchange for something I love to do, which is writing and editing. I'm turning down that extra paycheck for this job, the extra paycheck for that job, because I'm so focused on the success of my own publishing company and on my own projects. The Outliers Volume 1 is the book that we're working on right now. I'm so dedicated to it being successful that I'm going to take on however much stress comes with that. And then I'm going to look at other projects, other possibilities, and say, how much can we take on here between me and my collaborators? How much can we take on and not drop the ball on the projects we're all tied into?
Mm.
We're all asking ourselves those questions. When we find that limit, we have to have the self-discipline to say, okay, this is how much I can handle. As much as I'd like to take on more work, it's not realistic. It's not, in the end, it wouldn't be good for me or my collaborators or my backers if I drop the ball in
No,
any
exactly. No.
one of these projects. So it's better for me to say, be realistic with myself, be honest with myself. This is what I know I can handle. I think it's good to say that's what I'd like to think that I could handle, but I have to work toward that. And then I do whatever's necessary. If I have to give up video games to free up enough time to do the social media and the promotion and all that stuff, I'd really rather not do. But if I understand it's a necessary component to put myself out there to convince people to buy the book, then I give up video games and I do that. If I have to give up, sleeping in an extra 2 hours on Saturday because I have to make sure that all of the collaborators on the project are meeting their deadlines, then I give up the 2 hours of sleeping in on Saturday. It's like that mindset of whatever it takes, I will get it done, and I refuse to fail.
The only thing I've managed to keep is late night drinking. Everything else is gone. That's it. I have no time at all. I'm working 6 days a week. I take Saturday off because you have to have time off. If you don't, then you will burn yourself out, and that doesn't help anybody. So I take Saturday off. Fridays, it's nearly all day because I go out for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
And then I walk on Saturdays as well. And I try every day. I go outside at the moment because I'm not able to get into a dojo. I was saying earlier, every day I go out for 40 minutes and do all my kata. So you must bind those things into your days, or you will burn yourself out. Yeah. You must give yourself those down moments. But at the same time, there's things that you can give up. There's things that are not required. At the moment, I'm just not occasionally with the late night drinking, I get to watch something.
Mm-hmm.
I take an hour off or an hour and a half off to go and spend with my wife every day. Okay. To go and watch something with her in the evening, and then I'll carry on working.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes late, if there's something, if I'm having a drink, so I'll just have a little snifter before I go to bed.
Yep.
And I'll maybe get to see half an hour of New Gods or something like that, and so I get to, but I'm, other than those little things, I'm actually not interested in cinema at the moment. I really love independent comics. I'm buying a lot of those, but mainstream I'm not buying. I'm getting back issues and what have you. So I'm more interested in what I'm creating than in consuming other people's creations.
Same here.
Which is a bit narcissistic, but I'm actually really enjoying the whole process. So
rather than narcissism, I would argue that it's a very direct piece of evidence that you're really enjoying the work that you're doing. I have found the same thing. I have found that in the last 6 months or whatever, 7 months maybe, I've been extremely busy with comic work because I choose to be. It's because I'm enjoying it so much. And also, gratefully, I admit that it's because people are, asking me to take on freelance work. I'm very grateful for that and humbled by it whenever somebody asks me, to work on their project, or they ask me if I'm available to work on their project. I'm extremely grateful for that. And I wouldn't make myself so busy with other people's projects if I didn't love, the work that I'm doing. So But at the same time, I realized, and there's some talk in the chat about video games, and George
Mhm.
suggested that creators stop talking about giving up video games. I would just say, George, we talk about it because we love video games too. So many
Yeah.
of us would love to continue playing video games. I mean, I used to play. Oh man, I literally the first video game I played was Pong on a black and white TV,
Mm,
and
me too.
I played all kinds of games, from arcade games to console games to computer games. I used to, build and upgrade computers, and I was a hardcore PC gamer, and I did it, literally for decades. But when it came to producing my own comics and creating my own publishing company, I just had to be very realistic. And the point isn't to badmouth video games. Uh, that's not it at all. Um, I also have given up, watching movies for
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
almost exclusively, and I love watching movies.
yeah.
I gave up watching a lot of TV shows
Mm,
that I really enjoyed. The point is not to badmouth a particular hobby. The point is just to say um, the limited time in the day
mm,
and the large amount of work that it requires to produce comics for most of us, especially those of us who are married or who have kids. I'm an at-home dad, so my primary job is raising those kids and making sure that I'm holding things down for the wife who's out earning the money that pays our bills, right? So my day job is at-home dad. I only get to work on comics part-time, evenings and weekends. So because of how my schedule is, my life priorities, um, I have a limited amount of hours in the day, and so for my personal situation, I had to give up video games and watching a lot of movies and watching the TV shows that I liked to create time to make comics.
mm.
So that's where I think people crowdfunding creators, when they talk about not playing video games, I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I bought myself. I love Doom, and
Mm-hmm.
I got Doom 2016, and I got the Doom Eternal, and I just never got to finish it because not because I don't want to do it, but because I want to do this more. I have to say, I'm very fortunate. This is my full-time job. This is
Mm-hmm.
what I do. Okay, so later on this year, I've got some video game stuff to do. Um, Before I started on Only Death Can Save Us, I was doing storyboarding and other uh, uh, digital uh, illustration and what have you. So
Yeah.
it is my business. This is what I do. Primarily, I would only want to draw comics, full stop. And thank God, at the moment, that is all I am doing, and it's
Mm-hmm.
brilliant. Whether it's Only Death whether it's my IP or whether I'm completely invested in Outliers as well. The
Mm-hmm.
great book. And I'm very fortunate to be doing this all the time. And so I would say that to be fair, to level this, don't feel too sorry for us, because not only is it the case that I don't have time for these extra things, I'm actually enjoying what I'm doing more than
Yeah.
when I was doing those things. So it's not slagging those things off. It's not saying, oh, they're all, they're no good anyway. No, they're great. I love them. It's just that I love this more.
Yeah.
And because of that, I'm completely invested in it, and hopefully it brings a better product at the end of the day. So
Yeah, I agree. I love what I'm doing, and I can only say that while I miss the fun that I had, doing those other things, if you ask me right now, well, do you want to give up, a couple of your comics jobs so that you can go back to doing that stuff?
no,
I would say
no.
no, because I'm enjoying it too much, and I'm more. I find the work of making comics more fulfilling. Being a professional storyteller, it is more fulfilling for me professionally than anything I've ever done in my life that someone
Yeah.
paid me to do.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, I've done all kinds of jobs, and no, no, no. This is by far and away the best. I just have to do one thing for George. Sorry, for Leroy.
Oh, there you go.
There you go, Leroy. Um, and I was looking at something in the chat, something that where are we? Skip said something that I remembered. Something about Bendis. Yeah, Bendis made it happen. Drew his own book for years and self-published.
Yeah.
Yeah, that says everything. You know, like just it was just committed to the medium, whether you like him or not. Yeah, I salute you. You know, it's about that commitment, and
Hmm.
that's how you make a success out of it. So you know, we're binding it all back to what we were talking about, the magic cactus.
Right.
You have to make it happen. You can't sit and complain about what other people have got, and you can't be all X factor about it and say, well, my mum really likes my book, why aren't you buying it?
Yeah.
You have to live in the real world. You have to see that, you know, you have to make your success happen, and you also have to be realistic about what you have on show. Is your
Yeah.
product good enough to make the kind of success that you're after?
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where if somebody were to essentially say, okay, well, I'm going to draw the story that I want for me, or I'm going to write the story that I want for me, and they don't do any sort of market research to try and get a sense for how many other people might like it as well, then it really is just a gamble.
Mm,
It's almost like closing your eyes, turning around 3 times, and then throwing a dart and just hoping it lands on the dartboard.
yeah. Well,
Regardless of how close to the bullseye, you just hope it gets on the board.
yeah, you've got to have a combination. You've got to think to
Yes.
yourself, okay, I want this creative endeavor. I want to get across these kind of ideas. I
Hmm.
want it to be I want it to be my ideas. I want it to be part of me, but at the same time, you have to fashion it in such a way that it has the potential to be popular, that it
Yeah.
has the potential to be entertaining, that it has the
Right.
potential to be taken off a shelf, you know, because it looks great.
Hmm.
You have to take all these things into account. You can't just sit in a bubble and say, well, I want to write it like this, and I love this stuff, and so, you know, I'm going to sell it, and if people don't like it, then obviously there's something wrong with them. No, you
Right.
got to play to the audience, the potential audience,
Hmm.
whatever potential audience there is out there for your book. You
Yeah.
have to play to them, and don't just don't just be selfish about it.
I've gotten a lot of really good feedback from people who have seen Outliers artwork, or who have listened to me describe the world or the stories or
Mm,
the characters. And one of the things that I suspected in the early days when I was developing the property, I suspected that if I were to kind of survey the landscape and just pay attention to what people were saying they wanted to read, what they wanted to buy,
mm,
if I could come up with something that satisfied that demand and is also something that I would want to buy as a customer, and something that I knew I would enjoy creating and developing as a
mm.
franchise, then it's win-win,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's how the Outliers came to be. I actually had a completely different property that I had developed previously that I was going to bring to market in 2019. And about a week before I was going to go public with it, um, it turns out that another creator went public with their project that had a very similar theme to mine. Now the
Right.
characters are totally different,
Mm,
the time frames are totally different, but I just thought that it was too similar to take a chance of coming out with it after I'd done all this work and then having people say, "Oh, well, you just ripped off so and so. You're just trying to hop on so and so's bandwagon." So I shelved that project. I'm definitely going to come back to it in the
yeah.
future, but
Was
I'm
that the one you spoke to me about?
about the one that was the. Well, no, I don't think so. It's not the sword and sorcery one that I told you
All
about.
right. Okay.
It's a different one. It's basically it's about how the world almost ended in 1999, and
Ah. Okay.
There was this. There's this ongoing war between the forces of heaven and hell,
Right.
and how it plays out affects what goes on the earth.
Right.
And so anyway, I developed it. I won't go too much more into that.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I, I
George.
shelved I shelved it. I'll come back to it in the future, but
Right. Yeah.
um,
Yes, George. There is a sword and sorcery one knocking around in Joe's head, and I've got first dibs on drawing it. So there you go.
yep, yep. About that, I'll say that I have a sword and sorcery um, property that I spent years developing, and it's when I say that the Outliers is as big as Marvel and DC from the 70s and 80s smashed together and set in modern day, like any character, any storyline, any environment you could think of, we can do that in the Outliers.
Hmm.
I have the same type of property already built that is in a fantasy setting. And so we're planning on doing a 12 chapter run on the Outliers. We'll introduce the entire story arc, and we'll give people a chance to get immersed in that world. And depending on the response from people, how much they like it, do they want more books, we'll respond to customer demand accordingly. But then the next property that is on deck would be the sword and sorcery one, um, and it would be kind of like Conan meets Lord of the Rings, um, with some twists on fantasy storytelling convention that I've never seen in print before. That doesn't mean they never existed. I'm just saying that I never saw them, and I read a whole lot of fantasy books in my life. So um, there you go. I guess that's
Yeah.
that's the tease for
That would
the other
that would
property.
that would be. I yeah. I think we've got stuff to be getting on with.
I agree. Let's show off some artwork.
I
We've been chattering away for over an hour. Let's
just thinking we've I've got work planned for years now.
yeah.
It's such a lovely position to be in.
So we're going to show you guys. I mentioned at the start of the show that last week we looked at some layouts of pages for the Outlier, some interior pages. And this week we've got a couple of pages that have been completely penciled. So we're going to show you page one, the layout, and then we'll show you the finished artwork.
So that's the layout. I think everyone's seen it. It was we had it up last week or the week before or something. So.
Yeah, there may be people joining the show today who weren't there last week. So there's the layout. You can see it's a sketch that has all of the figures in place. There's some detail on the foreground figure. As you go into the background, there's less and less detail. And we've got the environment laid out, and we kind of see the direction that the figures are moving, that sort of a thing. And then let's go to the finished page.
Sorry. This one. There you go.
There you go. So now we see a lot more detail in both the figures and in the backgrounds. We see that a lot of the basic forms are now fully rendered, but there's more depth to the page. Use of differing line weights, meaning the thickness or thinness of the lines. And we've got some effects that are now drawn in where before they may have only been indicated. They might not have only been, they might not have even been on the page, but now that they're in place. So when Russ is ready for inking, then he'll go over with traditional ink. He'll print his his penciled pages out in blue line, and then he'll. Why am I talking about this, Russ? Why don't you talk about your process?
Yeah, well,
You're
it's
the guy doing the work.
pretty much what you said. Yeah, I'll print it out in blue line and then ink over the top. I've got myself some new brushes, so I'm quite keen to be getting on. This is the sketch for page 2.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we're looking at very rough anatomy and positioning and just general scene setting, and then
Yeah.
then I can go in and give it the proper requirement, the getting the rendering right and putting in the backgrounds, getting the shade and the lighting in the right place, and that adds to the story as well.
Mm-hmm.
What you don't realize is when you're reading a comic often is just how much of a visual cue you get. It's obvious in some ways, but if you're reading through the speech bubbles and you're following the story and it's beat to beat, but there's so many different subtle cues that you get, such as
Mm-hmm.
lighting, that make a massive difference.
Yeah. And so our colorist, Inkspots, is going to use the cues that Russ gives in his line work, things like lighting and shading and all that. And Inkspots will read and interpret that visual information so that when he applies color, he'll be able to use colors to play off of and enhance those indicators that Russ sets up in the line work. So that's where it really starts to become a collaboration between two different artists, both very skilled in what they do, both doing something very different in terms of the details of how they carry it out, but they're both producing art. So Russ is producing line art, Inkspots is producing color art, and when you've got two people who really know what they're doing and understand how to set each other up for success, knowing and appreciating what the other person can do with their work, then I tell you, as an editor, as a publisher, as the creator of the franchise, I'm so excited to see what comes out once you put Russ's line work with Inkspot's color work. I'm thrilled. I cannot wait.
Well, what I was saying earlier about seeing that book that I hadn't seen for 18 months, it's when you see that next level, when you see somebody else putting their part of the team
Mm-hmm.
of the project to on it, like the colors, or even actually be surprised the lettering, seeing other people lettering your work and seeing where they put it kind of brings it to life as a comic. And it's just it's I mean, obviously I on Only Death Can Save Us, it was all me.
Mm-hmm.
From the production perspective. I'll be looking for a letterer and a flatter for the next book,
Mm-hmm.
because I just don't have the time to do it all on my own and get it out as quickly as I wanted to get it out. But there is something to be said for being in a team.
Yeah.
There's something very special about comics, to some degree, traditional animation as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something special about that whole team effort, and what you often the whole is greater than the constituent parts.
Yeah.
Without just being something special.
Well,
So,
and now that you mention it, I'll just say that for people who plan on backing the Outliers, I hope that when you see finished pages, that is, they've been penciled, inked, colored, lettered. I hope that our book will stand out among the competition for multiple reasons, but relevant to our conversation today. I have recruited people specifically because I thought they were not only good at what they do, but I thought that they would be the right type of creator to work on this specific project. So I recruited Russ specifically for this book. If I was working on a different book, I might have gone for a completely different artist. But I thought Russ was the guy or the gal. To It depends on the day of the week. Sometimes he's one, sometimes he's the other.
Depends whether my bra is in the wash or not.
But I recruited Russ specifically for this project, and I recruited.
Get Leroy out of here. Kick Leroy.
So I recruited Russ specifically for this project, and for the color work, I had an image in my mind of what I wanted the colors to look like, and so I recruited Inkspot specifically to produce that work. Eric Weathers, I know exactly how I want this book lettered. That's why I recruited Eric. And in the putting together of all of these different talents and skills, I, as the creator as well as the writer, I've tried to set these guys up as much as I know how to be successful when they collaborate with each other. So an example would be when Russ is laying these pages out, going off of the writing I've given him. There are moments where I'll indicate, like, when we do this panel, let's make sure we give Eric enough room for a sound effect in this area. Because I'm trying to think, how does lettering, which I consider an art form, how is that going to complement the lines, the colors? So we're trying to take, as Russ said, all of these different parts, and when we put them together, we hope that the total impact for the reader will be greater than simply just adding the individual parts together. Yes, Leroy, I've actually got a specific moment in chapter 2 that I've designed around the splort sound effect that Eric loves so much. Eric has apparently a life goal to have at least one splort in every comic that he letters.
And usually adult comics.
Yeah, definitely. And so there's a moment in chapter 2 that I already had blocked out, but I'm specifically going to describe it in such a way that we have a splort in there. We got to keep our letterer happy.
Always.
So I think that pretty much wraps up the show, Russ. I just want to say that I am absolutely thrilled with the work that you're turning out, and I'm really looking forward to sending out an email update to the mail list. I'm going to be trying to do that today. And I wanted to hold off until we had some pages that we could show that were laid out, and then we could show some finished line art. For those who were on the mail list, you can expect an update from me about once a month. When we get into the campaign, it might be once every 2 weeks. We'll see how things go. We'll see how often people want to get updates. But for now, about once a month. And when we have artwork to show, then I'll certainly include that in the email updates. So if you're not on the email list and you'd like to know how things go with the project, you'd like to get behind the scenes access to the production process and the campaign when we start putting it together, and you'd like to get input to how the campaign is assembled and what's offered and the pricing and all of that, then we invite you to join the Outlier Comics email list. The link is in the pinned comment. YouTube has been messing with moderators' ability to post links. YouTube has an automated moderation bot that, for whatever reason, is just deleting links every time a chat moderator tries to post one. It's happened before. I'm not sure why they do it, but I'm hoping that it'll be a couple of days and then it'll end. I think last time it lasted for 3 or 4 days and then they stopped doing it.
It went away, didn't it?
Yeah. So that's it for us. Everybody, thank you for joining the show. We really appreciate your time. We know you could be spending it doing anything else, and you're choosing to spend it with us. So we are very grateful for that. And we hope that you guys all go out and make a great day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Leroy says it best when he says more Smurfs and less sports.
More Smurfs
Less
or
sports.
less Smurfs?
More Smurfs, less
Oh,
sports.
he wants more
Yeah,
Smurfs.
I personally,
less
I
sports.
loathe Smurfs, but you know, I can
I
understand.
yeah, I
I
would say
appreciate there's different people, you know, different folks, different strokes.
yeah, I would say less Smurfs, more splorts. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you said, to each their own. And with that, bye.
How's Vidania?